619, Michael Cohen, 1320 WILS. Are there any events that you're interested in locally or stories that you'd like us to get someone on the show to talk about? Let us know. Send us an email, ccrecap@gmail.com, ccrecap@gmail.com. So the situation dealing with Marine Sergeant Tamaresi, I believe. Well, let's get to it. Brian Bouffard is an expert in military justice. His website, jagdefender.com, jagdefender.com. He's a former U.S. Navy JAG lieutenant. I know I totally butchered his name, Brian. How do you say it?
I believe it's Tamaresi, Mike.
Tamaresi, yep. And he's been down there in Mexico for 6 months. He's got PTSD. Well, first of all, when you have PTSD, you've dealt with a lot of soldiers. Does that change the legal issues in any way?
Well, it doesn't really change any legal issues, usually as far as guilt or innocence is concerned. In other words, if you know right from wrong and you're capable of exercising your own will as far as what you're doing, then you're responsible for the criminal acts that you may commit. But where it does oftentimes come into significant play is at sentencing, because having PTSD can be a huge mitigating and extenuating factor in a criminal case.
Okay. Oh, it does. So you've represented guys, I'm sure, that have been women that have had PTSD, right?
Absolutely, both in the military and in the civilian world.
And so what happens in the sentencing phase typically with that being a factor?
Well, during a sentencing phase in any criminal case, it's the prosecution's job to bring in evidence to show why somebody ought to be sentenced harshly, and it's the defense's job to bring in evidence in extenuation and mitigation, which basically reasons why, even though somebody just got convicted, his punishment should be lighter. And
what kind of a reduction does PTSD lead to? Give like an example. If you got like a 20-year sentence, how much of a cut would you see?
Well, that's very, very fact dependent. But maybe a better way to look at it is just, how much are juries swayed by the fact that somebody raised their right hand, they took the oath to defend us, and they went out there overseas and saw horrible things in the course of what they were asked to do. And juries can often be very impressed by the fact that a defendant did that, as they should be.
Okay. So does it lead to reduced sentences then?
It certainly can. Okay. I mean, again, every case is different, but if I had a client with PTSD, certainly explaining that to the jury and making sure the jury understands everything that happened to bring him to that point, that engenders a lot of sympathy, and again, I think rightfully so.
Okay, now Sergeant Tamaresi, he now ends up in Mexico. Now he says he accidentally crossed the border, but he was carrying weapons. What do you make of the way the Mexican government's been handling this case so far? Well,
there's a lot of reasons why I'm glad I live in America and not in Mexico, and being subject to their legal system is one of those reasons. Ours isn't perfect, but I would dare say it's better than the Mexican legal system. Mm-hmm. That said, when you're in another country, you got to follow their rules and you got to obey their laws. And I've been to the San Ysidro border crossing many times south of San Diego, and again, I wasn't there with Sergeant Tamaresi, and I don't know exactly what happened, but I do know that that's not a border crossing that's possible to mistakenly cross. I mean, it's huge. And you know what you're doing when you go over that crossing, if that's in fact where he crossed.
Okay. Well, let me ask you then about President Obama. Some say, look, he has not been very vocal or does not appear to have been engaged in trying to help this guy. Do you think he should be doing more?
Well, I don't know, because I'm by no means an Obama supporter, but I'm sure that he, like any president, there's a lot that goes on that we don't know about. But I do think that it's a dicey thing to basically contact the leaders of another country and say, hey, just, because our guy is American, give him special treatment, when a Mexican citizen would not get such special treatment. So,
right. Mm-hmm. Now, you told me that you have dealt in situations where a U.S. soldier has been in some kind of a foreign custody for at least a period of time.
Yes.
So, I mean, is there anything that can be done from a legal U.S. position in a situation like this?
Well, I mean, diplomacy on some level, but again, you have to recognize we're basically asking them to grant an exception to their criminal laws that other people might not get. You can. I hate to even compare North Korea to Mexico, but you can take a look at the Americans who've been detained in North Korea. President former President Clinton, had to go out there on a humanitarian mission to get a couple of them released, and some of them are still there.
We're playing by their rules, basically. Now, in the case that you were involved with, you said it happened in Japan?
Right. I had a case not too terribly long ago where my client was arrested by Japanese authorities, but that case was, very different because very, very quickly the Japanese authorities surrendered him to the military, and then he was prosecuted in the military.
Mm-hmm. But could Mexico have just done the same thing in this case?
Well, I don't believe Sergeant Tamaresi was on active duty. I believe he is a reservist. I could be wrong about that. I'm not sure that when he went over there, he was subject to the UCMJ at that time, the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Okay. So with everything that you know about the case, do you think that he's been treated appropriately legally by Mexico, or do you think they've somehow taken some kind of a harsher position on him than they should have?
I don't know about that. I do know, kind of like what I alluded to earlier. I mean, I think that their system could be fairly described as more brutal than our system. So, in a way, I kind of object to almost anything that's done over there as too harsh. But, again, I mean, put the shoe on the other foot and imagine that a Mexican national is incarcerated, here in Texas or in Arizona or someplace, and the Mexicans are upset that we had the audacity to jail one of their citizens for breaking one of our laws. I mean, we would think that that's fairly ridiculous.
Well,
so I think we owe them the same courtesy.
What's interesting is they're not releasing him yet. They said what they're waiting for is proof of his medical condition. The Mexican Attorney General said that's the holdup. As soon as they get that, they'll let him go.
Well, I hope that's true. I mean, for his sake, I would hate to be in his position. But, that's part of the reason why I and hopefully most other people would take steps not to end up in that position. But do I hope he gets released? Absolutely. I hope he gets released today.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're saying it could be any day now. Brian Bouffard, expert in military justice, a former U.S. Navy JAG lieutenant commander. Now he does criminal defense law for both the military folks, military and civilian law, Brian?
Yes, sir, both.
Yeah. How was it half and half, would you say, your practice?
Just about. I'm based out of Fort Worth, Texas, so I do criminal defense here in Texas, and then I do military defense worldwide.
Gotcha. So how much traveling do you do in a given year?
Quite a bit. I enjoy it a lot. I'm actually going to leave here in 2 weeks. I'll be in Japan, in Okinawa, on a Marine case, so I'm looking forward to getting back out there again.
Really? So when you go out there, you have to be there through the whole trial, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm his lawyer, so
gotcha. So that can go on for what, weeks or months even? Or?
Normally not. When I think of horribly long trials, I think back to the O.J. Simpson trial that lasted months and months. But the average criminal trial, even a very serious felony, both in civilian court and in the military, you're probably in there 4 or 5 days. Usually they're done in a week.
Do you get many more requests for representation than you can cover? Or?
I do, and I hate having to turn people down, but there's only so many hours in the day and so much work that can be done.
How do you decide the cases you'll take then?
I like to take cases that I think are interesting. Personally, I do a lot of sexual assault litigation. Primarily, it's kind of a hot button issue for me lately because of the way that Congress and the senior leadership in the military are treating it. I think a lot of the things they're doing are extremely unfair.
Really, how so?
To people who are accused.
How so?
Well, we're in kind of a witch hunt atmosphere, and Congress is doing, or appears to be doing, just everything that it can to make it more difficult for someone to express and be vindicated as far as being innocent is concerned. They're stacking the deck in favor of the government, and I think all of us should be afraid of that.
Right, this impression then that there is an epidemic of sexual violence in the military, is that accurate?
I don't believe that it is accurate. Now, and I'm sure some of your listeners may be, getting red, under the collar at that. But what I mean by that is when Congress is relying on this so-called epidemic and using that kind of fear to drive litigation or to drive legislation, you got to hope that those statistics are accurate. And I don't believe that those statistics are accurate because I haven't seen a methodology that I agree with. And for example, somebody, they can do a study, and usually it's a law enforcement biased study that doesn't even define the terms correctly. And so they'll count something that's not a rape as a rape and then say we've got this huge problem.
Gotcha. Well,
I do think one sexual assault is one too many, but so is one false accusation.
Right. Well, we'll certainly have to have you on to talk some more about that. Brian Bouffard, the website jagdefender.com, jagdefender.com. Brian, thank you.
Anytime, Michael. Thank you.